I still remember the way my hands trembled after I hit send. It was supposed to be private, intimate, a surprise for him, my boyfriend. We'd been apart for weeks, and the ache of distance had become unbearable. So I did something bold, something playful. Something I thought would make his heart race the way mine had when I filmed it. I lit candles in my bedroom, slipped into the softest silk I owned, red of course, the kind that clung to skin and shimmered in the low light. The music was low, barely there. Just enough to cover the sound of my own heartbeat. I danced slowly, seductively, eyes locked on the camera like he was really there watching me. Every look, every movement was for him. I spoke his name like it was a secret no one else would ever hear. But someone else did. I found out the next morning, in the most stomach-dropping way imaginable. I was brushing my teeth, scrolling through messages, waiting for his reaction. But there was nothing from him. Instead, I saw a reply from a number I barely recognized. A short message, just one sentence. That wasn't meant for me. Was it? I froze. My toothbrush dropped into the sink. My heart stopped, then pounded so hard it felt like it might break through my ribs. It was his father. Somehow, instead of sending that video to Liam, I'd sent it to Mr. Callahan. His name had popped up next to Liam's in my contacts. I must have clicked the wrong one. A stupid, careless mistake. I didn't breathe for a full minute. My body turned cold, then hot. I wanted to disappear, to crawl into a hole and never come out. My cheeks burned so deeply I thought I might cry. I didn't even open the video again. I couldn't. All I could think about was what he'd seen, what I'd shown him. That slow undoing of silk straps, the curve of my body as I turned, the breathy whisper of Liam's name. But this was the part that truly shattered me. He didn't just see it. He responded. And his next message, it made me feel something I never expected. Something dangerous. Something that made it impossible to look away. I must have stared at my phone for 10 minutes before I opened the second message. I was expecting anger, disgust, maybe even a warning to stay away from his son. But what I got instead was silence at first. Then suddenly 3 little dots typing. Then this, you probably want me to delete it. I should. But I haven't. My stomach twisted so tightly it hurt. I sat down on the edge of my bed, phone shaking in my hand, heart thudding against my ribs like a warning bell. I read the words over and over. It wasn't a rejection. It wasn't even cold. It was honest, quiet, almost like a confession. I didn't respond. I couldn't. What would I even say? Instead, I paced my room for what felt like hours. I kept seeing flashes of the video in my mind, the candlelight on my skin, the way I whispered Liam's name. But now it wasn't Liam's face I imagined watching. It was his father's. Mr. Callahan was older, obviously. Distinguished. Sharp jaw, graying temples, always so composed in his crisp button-downs and quiet authority. I'd seen him smile maybe once. He had those eyes, the kind that looked like they were always holding something back. The kind that made you feel seen, maybe too much. And now he'd seen me like that. Later that night I got another message. Just a single line. You looked beautiful in red. That was it. My breath caught in my throat. My hand went still over my chest. Because it wasn't lewd, wasn't crude, it was intentional. A line drawn so carefully, so close to the edge without stepping over. He saw me. Not just the body I showed, but the intention behind it. The confidence I tried to summon. The emotion in my voice. The slow reveal meant only for someone I loved. I should have been horrified. I should have blocked him, deleted the thread, pretended it never happened. But I didn't. Instead, I stared at that message until the room grew dark around me. And in the quiet, shame slowly twisted into something else. Curiosity. Heat. A question I couldn't shake. Why hadn't he deleted it? For 3 days we didn't speak. Not Liam. Not his father. I went about my life pretending everything was fine. But I could feel the tension like a storm just outside my skin. Every time my phone buzzed, my pulse skipped. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw candlelight in red silk. And those words, you looked beautiful in red. They replayed in my mind like a whisper I couldn't shut out. Not because of what they meant, but because of how he said them. Deliberate. Careful. Like he'd chosen restraint on purpose. Then came Sunday dinner. Liam had invited me over like usual. His parents were hosting. I almost made up an excuse to avoid it, but part of me wanted to go. Needed to go. I needed to see if he'd look at me the same way. I wore a black sweater and jeans. Simple, safe. No red. No silk. But when I walked into that house and saw him standing at the end of the hallway, something shifted. Mr. Callahan's eyes found mine immediately, and held them for just a second too long. I felt it. In my stomach, in my legs. A quiet ripple beneath my skin. He didn't flinch. Didn't act nervous. But there was something different in him. A pause in his breath, a tiny flicker in his eyes like he remembered every frame of what he'd seen. We sat across from each other at the dinner table. He made polite conversation, passed the wine, smiled at jokes. But beneath it all, I felt him watching me. Not in the obvious way. Not in a way anyone else would notice. But I noticed. The way his gaze lingered when I tucked my hair behind my ear. The way his voice softened when he asked if I wanted more wine. The way he said my name slowly, deliberately. Liam was right there, laughing beside me, oblivious. And yet, my skin felt electric. As if every move I made was being recorded again. As if the air between us carried something invisible and hot. I left early that night. I said I had a headache. Liam kissed my cheek, told me to rest. But when I walked past Mr. Callahan toward the front door, he stepped just a little too close. His voice was low, quiet enough that only I could hear it. You don't need Rhett to be unforgettable. He didn't wait for me to respond. He stepped back, hands in his pockets, eyes unreadable. But I stood frozen for a moment, heart pounding so hard I thought the walls might hear it. And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't a mistake anymore. It was the beginning of something I wasn't ready to admit, even to myself. After that night, nothing felt normal anymore. I still saw Liam, still answered his texts, still laughed at his silly jokes and leaned against him at the movies. But every time he kissed me, I felt a ghost between us. A presence I couldn't shake. His father's voice. That slow, warm murmur. You don't need Rhett to be unforgettable. It haunted me. Not in a frightening way, in the way something forbidden does. Like a secret touch in a crowded room. Like a thought you're not supposed to have, but that slips in anyway. And lingers. I didn't respond to him. Not with words. But I started to notice what I wore when I visited. Subtler things. Necklines. Lipstick. Perfume. And I watched him notice. Mr. Callahan never said anything else. But he didn't have to. His silence was more loaded than words. He'd glance once, then look away like he'd broken a rule. And when our eyes met across a room, there was a pause, long enough to make my heart beat faster. One evening, I stopped by unexpectedly. Liam had asked me to drop off his keys, and I knew his parents would be home. I thought I could be quick. Just ring the bell, hand them off, and go. But it was Mr. Callahan who opened the door. And something about the way he looked at me told me everything had changed. He didn't smile. He didn't speak right away. Just stepped aside slowly, motioned for me to come in. I should have handed him the keys and left. But I walked inside. He closed the door behind me with a soft click. For a moment, neither of us moved. The quiet stretched like thread pulled too tight. He looked at me, really looked, and I felt it down to my bones. Then he said it, low and careful. You've been in my head more than you should be. I didn't answer. Couldn't. But I didn't leave either. The air between us felt impossibly close. His eyes dropped for just a second to my mouth, to the edge of my collar. His jaw clenched like he was holding something back. Then he stepped forward. Not touching me. Just closer. Tell me to forget what I saw, he said quietly. Tell me to pretend it didn't happen. His voice wasn't demanding. It was raw. Honest. Like he wanted me to stop him but needed me not to. My breath caught. I could have said it. I could have ended it there. But I didn't. Instead, I whispered the only truth I could manage. I don't think I can forget it either. And that was the moment the ground beneath us shifted. Not all at once, but just enough to make it clear. The line between mistake and temptation had already blurred. And neither of us was stepping back. After that night, everything became more fragile. We never touched. Not really. But every moment near him felt like we were standing on the edge of something. Something neither of us dared to name. I'd pass him in the hallway, and the space between our arms felt charged. His hand would graze the countertop near mine, and I'd feel heat bloom through me like fire under skin. At dinners, his eyes would find mine for a second too long before dropping back to his glass. No one else noticed. But I did. And the worst part? I wanted him to look. One night, Liam was out with friends, and I found myself outside their house again. I told myself I just needed to talk to someone. I told myself I could keep it innocent. I knocked softly. Mr. Callahan answered, shirt sleeves rolled, eyes tired but alert. He didn't look surprised to see me. Just quiet. Guarded. "Liam's not here," he said, voice low. "I know," I whispered. "I wasn't looking for him." He let me in without another word. We stood in the kitchen for a while, not saying much. The only sound was the clock ticking, slow and deliberate. He poured me tea like nothing was strange, like this was normal. But when I took the cup, his fingers brushed mine. And the stillness that followed was louder than anything. His gaze lifted, held mine. "I'm not proud of how much I've thought about that video," he said softly. "Or about what I'd do if I ever found myself alone with you like this." My breath caught. I didn't know what to say. I only knew what I felt. The rush of blood under my skin. The way my knees felt suddenly unstable. "You haven't done anything," I said. "Neither have I." He stepped closer slowly. Not touching. But everything about him was pulling me in. "Not yet," he said. The silence that followed was unbearable. My pulse echoed in my ears. He raised his hand, so slowly it was almost painful, and brushed a strand of hair from my face. His fingers lingered, just barely grazing my cheek. And then, as if every ounce of restraint had pulled him back, he stepped away. "We can't," he said, voice barely above a whisper. But his hands trembled, and my heart felt like it had been set on fire. We didn't kiss. We didn't touch again. But in that single suspended breath of a moment, it felt like we had. It felt like the space between us had never been smaller. And more dangerous. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. The way he looked at me before he stepped back. The way his voice cracked when he said, "We can't." And the worst part? I didn't want him to stop. I told myself it was wrong. That I was just caught in the drama of it all, the secrecy, the danger. But that wasn't it. It wasn't about wanting something I couldn't have. It was about him. The way he made me feel visible. Real. Like every part of me had weight and consequence. Liam had never made me feel like that. The next time I saw Mr. Callahan was by accident. At a bookstore downtown, of all places. I was browsing the poetry section, something I did when I couldn't quiet my thoughts, and suddenly there he was. Holding a worn copy of Rilke. We both froze for a second. Then he smiled. Not the polite kind. Something softer. Sadder. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said. "I needed a distraction," I whispered. He nodded. His fingers traced the spine of the book like he wasn't sure what to do with them. Did it help? I shook my head. Not even a little. Neither of us moved. The air between us grew thick again. Not with silence this time, but everything we weren't saying. He stepped closer. Slowly. Carefully. Like he was giving me time to stop him. But I didn't. I couldn't. When his hand reached out and rested on my waist, it wasn't sudden. It was a question. And my body answered before my mouth could. I leaned into him. The embrace was quiet. No one would have looked twice. But to me it felt like the world narrowed down to that one point of contact. His warmth against me. His breath at the edge of my hairline. He didn't kiss me. He just held me. And in that still moment, between the pages of unread poems and unsaid things, I realized something terrifying. I didn't want this to be a mistake anymore. I wanted it to be real. I wanted him. His fingers pressed just slightly into my lower back before pulling away. His eyes searched mine. Full of restraint, full of something else. "I think about you more than I should," he murmured. I wanted to say me too, but my throat wouldn't let me. He left first. I stood there, heartbeat echoing in the quiet, with a poetry book still trembling in my hands. And I knew it was too late. Something between us had already changed. Something we couldn't undo. After that day in the bookstore, we didn't speak for weeks. No texts. No glances. Just silence. But the silence was heavier than words. I felt it every time Liam held me. This quiet, aching awareness that someone else had seen deeper into me. Not just the skin and silk, but the secret pulse underneath. And then one night it happened. Liam and I had gone out with friends. He drank too much, fell asleep the moment we got back to his place. I couldn't sleep. The house was dark still. Every creak of the floor felt like a confession waiting to happen. I found myself in the kitchen barefoot, the refrigerator light spilling softly across the floor. I poured a glass of water, leaned against the counter. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't have to turn to know it was him. Mr. Callahan's voice was low, rough with sleep. "You shouldn't be awake." I turned. He was standing just a few feet away, eyes shadowed but steady. "I could say the same about you," I whispered. He didn't smile. He just watched me, in that quiet way he always did, like I was a question he'd never dared ask aloud. "I still think about that night," he said. "Not the video. The way you looked at me before you left." I stepped forward. My pulse thundered in my ears. "I haven't stopped thinking about you," I admitted. "Not once." He reached out, slowly, almost reluctantly, and brushed his fingers against mine. "I'll always want you," he said. "But I can't be the one who lets it happen." A breath caught in my chest. Because he wasn't just saying no. He was giving me the choice. And for a moment the world froze. I could feel his warmth, the pull between us, the years and boundaries trembling on the edge. But I stepped back. Not because I didn't want him, but because I knew that if I crossed that final line, I might never find my way back. He nodded. Just once. Like he understood. And before I turned to go, I whispered the only truth that still mattered. "I hope you never forget me."